1, 2, 1, 2. One, two, 1, 2. No. One, two, 1, 2. Hang on, he's there. 1, 2, 1, 2. Can you hear me, ladies and gentlemen? Yes? Okay, if you could take your seats now because we're about to get underway. Thank you very much. Good morning, and a very warm welcome on behalf of the European Alliance for Transformative Therapies, known as Transform, the MEP interest group, to the 2023 conference, where we will be discussing the countdown to the European Union elections and the key question: how can policymakers secure the promise of advanced therapies for patients over the next 6 months? Co-hosted by Transform MEP Interest Group Chair Andrei Notek, who is with me here on the stage, and Group Member Susana Solis Perez, who will be with us for the second panel. My name is Jackie Davis. I have the privilege of moderating our discussions. A very warm welcome to those of you in the room with us, but also to those of you watching via live streaming. If later on in the discussions you have questions, this will be for those of you who are in the room, and as we are present and looking at each other physically, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. No need to get out a phone, a smart app or anything. Just raise your hand and I will give you the floor. My only request is that you are brief so that I can get as many of you in as possible. One other thing before we move on: social media. If you would like to send out messages about what I was going to say tweet out, but we can't say that anymore, can we? You say X out. It doesn't sound right at all. If you would like to send messages to the world, there we are, about what you are hearing here, and we do encourage you to do so, please use the hashtag MEPs for 80 MPs. It's now my great pleasure, I'll tell you more about the programme later, but my great pleasure to give the floor to Andrei Notek, MEP, to tell us a bit about what's been going on in this area and what lies ahead. Andrei, thank you for having us. Over to you.
Many thanks, Jackie, and also warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. It is my pleasure and privilege to welcome you again after a year in European Parliament on the behalf of the MEP Interest Group, member of the Transform Alliance, I mean the MEP Interest Group for Transformative Therapies, of course. As you know, the Transform Alliance is a multi-stakeholder platform bringing together all stakeholders across the value chain, including patient, with basically a simple task: to increase and improve the patient access to innovative therapies such as transformative therapies. If I look back, we have started somewhere in early COVID times with the MEP Interest Group and with the Alliance. It was the world of online, and we have slowly, meeting by meeting, put together pieces of something that has become, and last year this has been launched, a charter. So we have already since 1 year, we have had a charter with clear, robust set of policy recommendations across different policy sub-areas. We have already had chance to address small parts of them in legislation. And now, as Jackie advised, we are going to the European elections. And it's true that I see it in the House. Some colleagues already are coming less. Some activities are not so, or they are decreasing. However, this is not the case for pharma/medical, because we have this pharmaceutical package, and as often many say, this is a generation occasion. We have a revision of the pharmaceutical legislation, and I'm very proud that the Transform Alliance put together a position paper on the pharma legislation, on the revision. The draft has been done early June and updated recently. And we MEPs in the interest group, we are of course ready to follow closely the work and where appropriate to offer appropriate improving amendments. Today we are having two fruitful panels, so I will not go into detail, but allow me at least few points to set scene. We of course need to improve the patient access to the innovative therapies, and that means also regardless on their geographical or socio-economical situation. This is the reason why we need to find some, I would say, alternative or innovative pathways in a cross-border, in innovative and sustainable payments. I know we have invested a lot of time into debate on the sustainability of healthcare ecosystems. Of course, it's about enforcement of European reference network, or, for example, having appropriate capacity and structure of the EMA agency. Last but not least, for me, point is to learn from the COVID and simply make Europe an environment that is attractive for investments. Most of the investments are coming from private sector, and we are a little lagging behind, maybe not little, when we compare to US and China. And it is interest of Europe and European patients to have the value chain, including research, manufacturing, and all post-market surveillance and all regulatory activities done in Europe. So also the incentives models for innovative pharmaceutical technologies must be at least as sexy as in the US or China, but it's a little different environment. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to wish all of us to have a very fruitful debate, two nice panels. I'm pretty sure that with the 6 months European elections, our work doesn't end, and the platform of MEPs and the Alliance will go on after the elections. And I would like to thank you for all the job done to all of you in the last 3 years. And now, if I understood well, my role is to pass the floor to the next speaker, or I shall...
You pass back to me. I'll introduce them for you, Andre.
Many thanks and enjoy the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andre. Thank you. And again, thank you for hosting this event. I know Andre has some very pressing engagements. That's what life in the European Parliament is like. So you need to slip away, but we are very grateful to you, and we will report back on our discussions today. Thank you very much again. Always lovely to see you, Andre. Thank you. So, as Andre said, we're going to hear from a couple of members of the Transform Steering Group now to continue setting the scene for our conversation today. We're going to be joined by Alexander Natz, Secretary General of EUCOPE, the European Confederation of Pharmaceutical Entrepreneurs, and Martine Perjean, who is President of IPOPI, the International Patient Organization for Primary Immunodeficiencies. A very warm welcome to you both. Martine had a stressful morning getting here, but she's here now, and I hope feeling ready for action. Alexander, always good to see you as well. So they're just going to make some remarks to welcome you to this event, add their welcome to that of Andre, and underline why conversations like this are so important. But Alexander, over to you first.
Thanks very much. Does it work? Thanks very much, Jackie. It's a great pleasure to be here, to be in this in-person event, and also welcome to the colleagues which are joining online. I would like to speak a little bit about the distinct characteristics and the unique challenges which we see with ATMPs when we bring ATMPs to European patients. And once again, I would like to thank all people involved in the Transform initiative, in the Alliance, to set up this meeting, but also to set up what we have been actually achieving over the last, like 2.5, 3 years. I think it's great to see that we have so much movement in that space, that we have such a great multi-stakeholder collaboration when it comes to bringing patient organizations in, bringing industry in, bringing clinicians in, bringing all the relevant stakeholders in, also from the HTA and payer perspective. And I would like to kick us off very quickly around the unique challenges and characteristics of ATMPs. I mean, ATMPs are unique in that sense that there are upfront costs, and that's really what makes those products unique. But also they are unique in that sense that the technology behind ATMPs is very complex, I would say, and we will hear in the panels about those complexities which we see. They are also complex in that sense that when it comes to expertise, there's not always that expertise in all the EU countries. And we have been discussing that about when it comes to cross-border healthcare, that we need to make sure that actually patients get better access to innovative therapies, to ATMPs. So in a nutshell, we have to move patients to the expertise, to the centers where there's expertise about administering cell and gene therapies, and where at the same point in time there is expertise about the specific diseases. So that's a challenge when it comes to ATMPs. And I think there's a wide range of issues from research through access which we are facing when it comes to ATMPs. But I would also like to say something positive. I think actually we have been seeing companies releasing ATMPs to European markets quite a bit over the last 8 years. We have, I think by now, we have more than 4 products in the CAR T-cell indication. We have 1 product in SMA. We have a lot of other ATMPs in European markets, many of them in the field of rare diseases and ultra-rare diseases. And the future will probably move a little bit more in the direction of more common diseases in the field of ATMPs, now that we have a concept, a proof of concept when it comes to the technology, but also a proof of concept when it comes to the fact that healthcare system cannot accommodate those treatments in their pricing and reimbursement systems. It's not everywhere perfect. We have to discuss the tools and the vehicles which are existing to really make sure that we can accommodate those treatments, but there is a proof of concept. So let me also briefly touch on the EU pharma package now that we're here in the European Parliament and that we have seen the reports of the 2 rapporteurs on the pharma package. The pharma package contains a proposal on launch conditionality, and I think we all know how important it is to discuss modulations of incentives at some point in time to also see is our incentive system fit for purpose. But we also heard from MEP Notek that we need to remain competitive in that space. We need to give some incentives and intellectual property rights to companies, to investors, where the investors would know very early on how much exclusivity they would get. So the concept of launch conditionality is in a way questionable, I would say, when it comes to ATMPs, because as I said in the beginning, it's not that you have the expertise and the centers in all the smaller countries in that given disease, and therefore we really have to think more about the solution around cross-border healthcare. It is really important that we are working with existing legislation when it comes to ATMPs, and that could be cross-border healthcare, to really facilitate that patients can move borders and get reimbursement in other countries when they are treated with ATMPs, because we have seen some products withdrawn in that space of ATMPs. So what are the solutions which we could have at the European level? We think that we have to have a proper implementation of the EU HTA, because the EU HTA is not too far away from us. It's going to be, 15 months in the future that we will start with ATMPs. And that's a challenge because we have limited slots for joint scientific consultations. We had conferences here in Brussels quite recently. So we need to make sure that we get it right, because we're not starting with the easiest products to start with in oncology and ATMPs. So we're actually starting with the most difficult products to start such a new system with. That's not a criticism of the system itself, but we need to get the implementation right. We need to look a bit more at the national level, and maybe also here in Brussels, about innovative payment models, because we've seen that actually they can work if you keep them simple in a way. We've seen them used in many ATMPs where there are chronic treatment options on the table as an alternative for patients. So we need to make sure what are best practice examples when it comes to outcome-based agreements, performance agreements. We need to get together here in Brussels to see what has been done at the member state level, and that takes a multi-stakeholder collaboration of patients, of healthcare systems, and also of pharmaceutical and biotech companies to find the right tools for innovative payment models. And almost last but not least, it's also about real-world evidence. We have had discussions, so many discussions actually here in Brussels, but also at the member state level. How can we make better use of real-world evidence? But that's in particular important when it comes to ATMPs, where we, in a way, have to hedge the risk of the payers as well, which have to pay everything up front. So we need to make sure that we can also better monitor the performance of a product by way of real-world evidence in the future, to make sure that actually payers are willing to say yes rather than saying no, because the clinical trial design might have been only in a small patient population, and not all the data gaps might have been closed at that point in time when we are launching our medicines. And last but not least, that's my biggest plea here, it's really that we need to work also, I think, from the patient perspective, that we need to work better with cross-border healthcare. It works when we are talking about the little things, the little surgeries in teeth and so on, when you go to other countries, but it doesn't work when it's really needed in rare disease conditions, in higher need conditions, in ATMPs. That is really where we have challenges to make that system, which is up and running, working. Last point, maybe the European Reference Network might be part of the solution in that respect. Thanks very much, Jackie.
Thank you very much indeed, Alexander, and lots to come back to in our sessions later on. I'll tell you more about them in a minute. But Martine, your opening thoughts, please.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. Thank you all for your interest and commitment into transformative therapies. I stand before you today as a member of the Transform Alliance Steering Committee, but also as a passionate advocate, a patient advocate, bringing to the forefront the critical dialogue on transformative therapies at the MEP Interest Group Conference. Why is this multi-stakeholder dialogue crucial? And what role does the Transform Alliance play in this debate? It's simple. Advanced therapy are poised to revolutionize healthcare. These groundbreaking treatments offer hope to individuals suffering from rare and devastating diseases, promising cures and alleviating long-standing suffering. However, despite their immense potential, challenges related to development and accessibility persist, leaving patients without much needed access. We are here today to explore strategy to overcome these obstacles at the EU level and to advance the cause of advanced therapies. So why is now an important time for this discussion, and what is at stake? The European Parliament and the Council of the EU are currently reviewing key health pieces, legislative pieces, such as the regulation of substance of human origin, the European Health Data Space, and the pharmaceutical package. These proposals have the power to future-proof our healthcare system, strengthen patient access to care, and make the EU an attractive hub for research and development of new therapies. The stakes couldn't be higher. Our ambitions for this event are clear. We aim to shed light on collaborative initiatives designed to break down the barriers, preventing life-saving therapies for reaching patients. We want to learn how we can increase the availability and affordability of innovative therapies like ATMPs, and we believe in close collaboration between regulatory bodies, researchers, healthcare professionals, patient organizations, and industry to expedite access while ensuring patient safety remains paramount. Today's focus is on identifying the most pressing challenges and finding effective strategies, and you have designed already some of them, Alexander, to address them, both at the EU and also national levels. We are committed to ensuring that patients in need have equitable access to these groundbreaking therapies, and with access, I don't only mean being screened, diagnosed, and treated, but also followed up, especially when the specialized or innovative treatment has been provided in another country. As we navigate through the legislative process, let us remember that ATMPs represent a paradigm shift in healthcare. They offer hope to countless individuals and families affected by rare diseases. I am excited about the prospect that lie ahead, and I pledge to work diligently to overcome the challenges we will discuss today. Together, we can ensure that these innovative treatments are not only accessible and safe, but also affordable for all European citizens. This event, hosted by the Transform MEP Interest Group in collaboration with the Transform Multi-Stakeholders Alliance, marks a crucial step in our journey towards a brighter future for healthcare in Europe. Thank you for your presence here today, and let us embark to this transformative path together.
Thank you so much, Martine. Thank you very much. So, as you said, these transformative therapies poised, as you put it, to revolutionise healthcare. You've talked about why the stakes are so high. You've talked about those key challenges and how we need to address them. Lots to discuss later on, but thank you to you both very much indeed. We're going to have two panels this morning. The first, we're going to focus on the pharmaceutical package and other legislative proposals that are on the table at the moment, and consider whether they are fit for purpose, given those unique characteristics, Alexander, that you outlined, and we're going to hear more about those unique characteristics in a moment. Then we're going to hear testimonials from two people who have benefited from transformative therapies. Delighted to have with us Giuseppe and Simona, who will talk to you later on. Benvenuto. But first then we're going to talk about broader issues relating to access. So not just those legislative, go beyond the legislative, because one of the things the position paper makes clear is you need all of these initiatives. You need legislative, non-legislative, collaborative approaches. That collaboration that you've both stressed is so important and is what Transform is all about. So lots to discuss. Thank you both very much for getting us off to such a great start and giving us so much to discuss. And of course, this at a very crucial moment in the EU legislative cycle. We have little more than 6 months to go before Andre indicated it's already slowing, but not in this area. But we have 6 months before it all grinds to a halt and the focus turns to those European elections. So we not only want to consider this morning what we need to do in the next 6 months to try to make sure that we make the progress that is needed on those legislative files, but also how do we keep the momentum up as you move into a new legislative cycle? What can we take from this cycle into the next? How are we going to go about that? So we're going to start, as I say, by asking the question, is the forthcoming EU policy fit for ATMPs? And consider in a little more detail the case for why cell and gene therapies are unique. Let me bring up onto the stage Transform Alliance members who are going to share their perspective and outline some of the key positions in this paper. Delighted to welcome Eleni Antoniou, who is Senior Policy Officer at the Thalassemia International Federation. We have Claire Booth, who is a board member, European Society of Gene and Cell Therapies, and a professor in gene therapy and pediatric immunology and a consultant at Great Ormond Street Hospital. Please come and make yourself comfortable as I introduce you. We have with us Giovanni Migliaccio, board member at the European Pediatric Translational Research Infrastructure and scientific director for the Consortium for Biological and Pharmacological Evaluations, and Anne Kerber, Senior Vice President, Head of Cell Therapy Development at Bristol Myers Squibb. Very warm welcome to you all. Give you a moment to pour yourselves a glass of water and get comfortable, and then we will dive in. I have asked each of them to make a presentation of somewhere between 3 and 4 minutes, just to give us their perspective on why these therapies are so unique and need unique treatment, and hopefully also to highlight some of the key points in the position paper. There were some copies at the entrance. If you haven't got one, please do grab one. For those of you watching online, you can find the position paper on the Transform website. So let's dive straight in. Eleni, the patient perspective on all of this. Over to you.
Good morning. Thank you everyone for attending this morning's event that is very crucial at this time, as Jackie said, and Alexander and Martin earlier on. So thank you for prioritizing the patient's views in this debate, because we are the end users, and from our side, we're talking about game changers here. These are game-changing therapies. So it is the first time ever we are actually speaking of a cure. So imagine having a disability-inducing disease, such as thalassemia, and thank you, Simona and Giuseppe, for being here today and witnessing for the very first time the life of a thalassemia patient and how this has changed with the gene therapy. So we are lucky and privileged to have these testimonies here expressed by these two people. And just because we are talking about a cure, it doesn't mean that a cure is not complex. And complexity means that many approaches and many actions need to be taken by many different stakeholders. And this is actually an added value of the Transform Alliance, having many voices brought together with an aligned position and some really, really, really useful recommendations to be taken aboard. So patients do long for a cure. And for us, access to this cure is a human right, because all human beings have the right to health, and they have the right to either improve their health status or even live a better life. So it's all about access to a human right, and this is something we can touch upon later on. And we have the European Union, the European Commission, protecting the human right of patients to health. And they have come up and picked up a number of legislative files that at the time were fit for purpose, such as the blood, tissues and cells legislation, the two directives that are now enshrined into the new proposal of the Commission for a SOHO regulation. And we see that there is an effort, a broader effort of updating files and upgrading them to make them fit for purpose. But the real question is, are they future-proof? Are they adequate? Because everything that exists now and is being reviewed, it is there for more than a decade or two. So we need to see what can be done to actually protect the future of citizens and protect the future of patients. And of course, as an alliance, we need to see what can be done at the European level and at the national level. And this is where there is a clash of competences. So multi-stakeholder collaboration is indeed needed, and patients need to be there at all stages, because without the patients, without the end users, we cannot actually define research priorities, define the problems correctly, and get to them and address them effectively. And of course, with the new initiatives coming up, like the European Health Data Space that is being proposed, and the primary and secondary use of data, what can be done without the patients? We need the patients to express their views on how their data will be treated after all. So just to wrap up, we need the same conditions for all member states, and I really want to come to that afterwards. We need equal infrastructure in all member states to build on that, because without having same infrastructure and harmonized processes across the EU, we cannot find a solution to the access problem. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you very much indeed. And that question of infrastructure we'll come back to in our second panel, I'm sure, but lots to ask you later on if we have time. I'm going to turn to, for a clinician's perspective, to Claire Booth.
Thank you very much. So I'm speaking from my own experience and on behalf of clinicians who've been involved in the development, translation, clinical trials and delivery of gene therapies for rare diseases. And I want to start by highlighting why ATMPs are unique from a clinical perspective. So advanced therapies offer patients with high unmet needs a potential therapy, a cure, a treatment that will improve their quality of life and bring significant clinical benefit. But there are challenges in providing ATMPs to patients. So they're usually highly personalized therapies involving complex manufacturing processes and demanding regulatory approval processes. And that requires a specific infrastructure to support their approval and use in patients. Additionally, the fact that rare and orphan diseases are the main targets for ATMPs means that clinical trials and delivery of licensed products can really only be undertaken in highly specialized centers. And given the often small patient populations involved in ATMP trials, conventional trial design are usually not feasible. But we're already seeing innovative ways to address this, such as umbrella or basket trial designs. It may also be impossible and unethical to demand the type of data expected from a more traditional drug product. For example, in patients with no alternative treatment options or poor outcomes with available therapies, undertaking a randomized controlled trial would not be at all appropriate or acceptable for patients and clinicians. So we're very pleased to see that the new legislation recognizes that real-world data has an important role to play in regulatory decision-making. And ensuring ahead of time that that data gathered is appropriate from all stakeholder perspectives will be key, and including the involvement of patients to understand what safety and efficacy evidence is relevant for them, their health, their quality of life, for example, through patient or physician-related reported outcome measures. And this dovetails perfectly with the pharmaceutical package stipulating the need for early and continuous dialogue with healthcare professionals and patients about the collection of real-world data, making sure that that data generated complies with regulatory and HTA requirements. Of course, this dialogue will also include a wide variety of relevant stakeholders. Another important area for generating data with small patient populations is the challenge of fulfilling requirements from agencies for international trials. Whilst this may be possible with pharma involvement, it is beyond the reach of academic developers, and limited EU funding is available to support international pivotal trials. There is a public responsibility to complete the pipeline, including access to innovative treatments for rare diseases, for which traditional development pathways are generally not fit. We would welcome any review of funding schemes to support this. And then moving on to delivering ATMPs to patients beyond clinical trials, we welcome the hospital exemption programme remaining in the new legislation, including support for harmonisation across the EU and the requirement for a public registry. This will address some of the issues surrounding patient access to therapies. But ultimately, and of critical importance, is that ATMP treatments of rare diseases affecting small and dispersed patient populations can only be sustainable through cross-border and international collaboration, with the creation of a platform that allows access from medical, legal, and regulatory perspectives. We already have some strong foundations in place to support this with the networks of ERN centres throughout Europe and beyond, and we hope that this new legislation will ease the regulatory and HTA challenges we face in delivering transformative therapies to patients in need.
Thank you very much indeed, Claire, and already coming back on those key points about using what we have, using the infrastructure that we have better, as well as looking for those gaps in infrastructure and how to fill them, and that point about clinical trials and why so important to take a specific approach here. Lots to come back to already in our discussions, but let us get a researcher's perspective now from Giovanni Migliaccio. Giovanni, good to see you. Over to you.
Thank you, Jackie. Well, first thing I will say, basic stuff. ATMP are new. They are completely different from what was a classic drug, if you want. And you know, one thing, I was a regulator, part of a national agency. We don't know how to treat them because they are new. They are different. Our experience is your experience. And now we are coming up with the new stuff that we don't know how to treat. And this comes from the academia, the ideas, the models. You know, we forget the basic stuff, how complex is going from one cell to an individual, how much regulation, how much interaction, how much gene expression, how it works. Academia works on understanding that, produce a lot of ideas, sometimes tools, and fill in space that is not covered by others. The funding from the European Commission in the ATMP field, it's huge. It's perfect, give us a lot of new information, new models, new approach. You know, we had the COVID, the mRNA vaccine. It's not an ATMP because it's a vaccine, but it comes from 10 years of development on how to use mRNA, how to pack it, how to inject, how to make it stable, everything developed in academia. So we welcome very much the fact that the regulation put the academic research in the regulatory process for the approval. There are still limitations, however, because academia has different purposes. Academia want to publish, and the system instead you want to protect your IP because you have to go to the market. How to fit the two different purposes is something that we have not solved yet. There was a proposal to have a sandbox for regulatory approaches. Well, it was deleted. Maybe right, maybe not, because the real things that the academic researcher need is not so much the final steps that are at EMA, are how to deal with the Inspectorate for GMP and GCP, that are different entities. They want to be safe, they want to be constant. How you are constant with the cell population, it's a question that makes us life really complex. Because we are going to personal. Each individual is an individual. Each cell, maybe it's different from your own cells. We are chimera, ourselves. We are not identical in all our cells. We have variation. How the Inspectorate deals with variation, it's a big issue, and it's not in the regulation. The legislation is slow, takes time. How to receive new ideas takes time. So flexibility needs to be in the agencies. And that is something that needs to be in the current legislation. Give the agency space to adjust, to incorporate new approaches. And that we hope it's coming with the next legislation. However, I have already seen some discrepancies from the regulation and the SO one, so it will be interesting.
Thank you very much indeed, Giovanni, and I hope we can come back on that question of flexibility in our discussion. Let us complete the picture with a perspective from industry. Anne Kerber.
Thank you. Yes, so let me take a step back, and I would like to demystify a little bit that word complexity and give a little bit of a perspective on that by looking into what this means for a patient, what is the journey of such a product. I know ATMP covers both gene and cell therapy, and there's some technical similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. In a gene therapy, there's a patient who has a gene defect, and you want to correct that gene defect. You want to, for instance, deliver the functional gene to that patient. So optimally, you would want that gene to persist forever and correct that gene defect forever. And you can do that, you know, in vivo, ex vivo. We don't have to go into details. But cell therapy is something different. Cell therapy is used to treat a disease. For instance, there's a patient who has cancer. You manufacture your cell therapy product. You want to have that product infused into the patient. It does its job, and then it disappears, right? You want to get rid of it after the disease is cured or managed. So I think that distinction is important, and what I'm going to talk about is more about that cell therapy approach, not the gene therapy approach. If you think about cell therapy and how it's used today, typically you have a late-stage cancer patient who's in very urgent need of a treatment. And that patient doesn't have much time and is being treated at a CAR-T or a hospital that has the capabilities, and that patient undergoes apheresis. That's a procedure that you can imagine a little bit like a blood donation, more complex, but in a similar setting. And you extract white blood cells from this patient. What happens next is that material, that those blood cells are being put in a delivery system, in a bag, in a box, that makes sure it's stable for a certain period of time while you ship it. And you have to control temperature there. Then you start shipping it. And the shipment itself is a sophisticated process. You have to have specific vendors that ship that for you. You cannot just send it by regular mail, obviously. And you have to know where it is all the way, every second of the day. You have to know where this is, who this belongs to, and you have to ensure there's a chain of custody, a chain of identity, because you don't want to mix it up. And it has to be fast, because A, the products are stable, and B, the patient is in desperate need. So it's about life and death in the next 4 weeks or so. Then you ship it to your manufacturing facility, and there the cells are being worked on, manufactured. So you separate out a certain population, you activate the cells, you insert the gene you want to insert into these cells so that they can recognize cancer. You expand the cells to a certain dose, and then you freeze them down in liquid nitrogen so that when you ship it back, they are a little bit more stable. Right? There's not a fresh product, there's a frozen product. Then you ship it back. Again, you have to know every second of the day where that product is, who that product belongs to, and when it will arrive at the site. You have to communicate to the treatment site exactly when that product's going to arrive so that they can prepare the patient. But the process is not finished after you've expanded the cells and you have them in the bag. What follows is quality control, and that's very, very rigid quality control. You have very heterogeneous incoming material, right? Every patient has a different bag that you got, but then you have to ensure that that product is still consistent. So you have to look at what's the composition of it, how does it work, does it actually kill cancer cells, is it pure enough? And that takes a while too. So it takes a while until you get that back to the patient. It's about 3 to 4 weeks. And you absolutely do not want to make any mistake in that journey, because if you do, it's going to be delayed, and that's going to be very, very, very difficult. So I just wanted to kind of show what's the complexity, and that also shows you what's the challenge with cost, what's the challenge with scale. We need about 500 people to manufacture 2,000 products a year. So that shows you where our challenges are. And then the question, of course, is why do you do it? We do it because it's absolutely transformational, and that was mentioned before, right? We have in cancer, we have patients who had a median life expectancy for certain blood cancer for 6 months. Now we have 1/3 of those patients that are life and disease-free after 5 years. So that shows the curative potential. So it's absolutely breathtaking. It's the future of medicine, but we have to make it happen. And I think in Europe, we have to be part of it. I would say it would be better if we would be leading it.
Thank you so much, Anne. And I think really helpful to really understand there what we're talking about in very concrete terms and why these therapies are so unique and why it is so challenging, as you have all underlined. I'm going to come out to all of you. I have lots of things I want to ask you all, but I'm going to privilege the room because you are here to listen to them. Does anybody at this point have a question for any of our panelists? Okay, I'll give you a little while to think. And I want to ask one quick overarching question and then a couple of very specific points. Eleni started by talking about, are they adequate? Do the proposals on the table take enough account of the uniqueness of the challenges Anne was just underlining? For you, is there a sense, maybe Claire, do you think there is enough focus on how unique they are? Are we headed in the right direction here? Because as Eleni said, the old legislation is old. We now need legislation that can move fast. We've talked a lot already about speed. Are we taking adequate account now, or is some tweaking needed to these proposals, do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good point. As I said, the framework that the legislative and regulatory framework that we currently work in was made for a completely different type of drug and different product. And, it does have its limitations for what we need to use it for. And I think Giovanni also highlighted nicely that, these are new products. We don't necessarily, we haven't learned everything yet. We've learned a lot, but we don't know how to approach that yet. So although there is some, movement within the new legislation, I think his point about the need for over how to address variability in these products and how to address how to give the agency some flexibility to be able to actually, as I would say, like put the, have some proportionate review to put the patient at the forefront, that we need to get this product to the patient, and how do we do that?
So it's that flexibility for you that's key. Hopefully we can come back on how we do it in just a moment. Eleni, you asked the question. What's your answer?
So we are heading towards the right direction, because we can see that the Commission has picked up strategic dossiers, and we see that they are trying to strengthen infrastructure. That's the reason I mentioned infrastructure. And we saw that by trying to work towards a European Health Union with a European health data space, this is a good step towards the right direction. And it is a challenge for the Parliament, because it will be actually a tangible and concrete commitment of the existing current members of the Parliament if they vote for the European health data space before the end of their term. So this is something we will come to discuss afterwards. So we saw that even with the existing regulations, with the clinical trials regulation and the information system that is actually operational and it's actually working, as we can see, we saw that there are some concrete efforts in implementing the HTA regulation with the joint scientific consultations, the joint clinical assessment reports. There is effort there. But at the same time, there is heterogeneity of services, and member states are not equal. So there is a huge heterogeneity across member states that actually inhibits progress in each different legislative file. So what we want to see is that the commitment will be there, but that at the same time, member states and the Commission will act like maestros in an orchestra, because we have the violins, we have all the different instruments there, but the maestro is missing.
Thank you very
We
much.
need leadership.
Thank you very much. And your answer to the question of whether we are on the right track in terms of taking account of all this variability and diversity, and crucially on this question of future-proofing. Are they getting it right, do you think?
I think there is certainly for looking forward into the future and making sure this is going to be, we're going to have a very strong foundation here in Europe. I think we have to make whatever changes are planned, and particularly in the general pharma legislation, that the language we are using is flexible enough to embrace the ATMP space. The second is that it should optimally incentivize it and think about good ways how to do that. There is the Prime scheme that is very important for us for many of our products, which should be enabling us to use that scheme in the regulatory process. There is a lot of hurdles to overcome when we do clinical research. GMO approval process is one, which is different from member state to member state. And I think, in Europe, we've shown that we have been very efficient. We could be very fast in the COVID crisis. I think that cancer and severe genetic diseases are also a health crisis. So why shouldn't we be showing the same nimbleness for that type of disease and for that new innovation that holds so much promise for these patients?
And Giovanni, you talked about that flexibility. You talked about the speed at which we can move and the speed at which we need to move. And you called for agencies to be given more space to adjust and adapt. More specifically, in terms of that translation from the lab to applications that can be used, how do we do that? How do we get that flexibility right? What do those agencies need to do?
Well, agencies, both the EMA and the national agencies, are charged with safety, and there is no limit to safety. How to evaluate the risk that is acceptable for a patient? How is it's relevant? And there is no real index to accept more or less risk if it's a small population, if there is no alternative. Yes, if no alternative, you can try, but how much risk is acceptable. If you ask the patient, it's a completely different answer that you get from the agency. And so some kind of flexibility, depending on disease, on the risk assessment that you do for the specific situation, should be there. But it's not only at the end of the process, should be included in all the development. Otherwise, the time will be long anytime. Will be more than 10 years for each drug.
Thank you. I just want to come back on a couple of specific points. And Eleni, could I just ask you a crucial issue of unmet medical need?
Yeah, because
complex, difficult issue.
It is a concrete, actually, example of what Professor has just said, because by mentioning and actually building a whole regulation on the concept of unmet medical needs is actually concerning and alarming to the patients' community. Simply because it's very strict, it's very narrow, and it is actually linked to incentives, and it is linked to the whole idea of bringing innovation into Europe. So here's the thing, unmet and high unmet medical needs is a term, a concept that has been defined at least 19 times in published literature. So if you ask the different stakeholders, there are different definitions of unmet medical needs. For us patients, for instance, and patient advocates, unmet medical needs is a false concept. We talk about unmet patient needs, for instance, because, and even for healthcare professionals, and I know that Claire will verify that and confirm that, unmet medical need is actually improving the life of a patient, even just a little. That is an unmet medical need and how it is addressed by science. So we cannot actually refer to unmet medical needs in such a crucial legislative file. We need to switch from a definition to principles that can apply. Is there something for patients that are ready, I don't know, for instance, cancer patients or for palliative care? Is there a treatment there in place? That could be a question. That could be a principle. Or what is the disease burden? What is the quality of life?
Indeed, and the position paper makes it very clear, that flexible definition, those guidelines, but not being so precise that you overlook some groups. Claire, did you want to add something there?
I was going to say, I think the position paper actually puts it out quite nicely about the unmet need, but also I think that comes back a little bit to what Giovanni was saying about risk. Who's the best place to say what risk is acceptable? The agencies or the patients who actually have to kind of undertake that. So the involvement of patients and, about the outcome measures and the endpoints of trials and the safety profile and acceptability. I mean, I think it is about why the patient advocacy groups and the patient community needs to be involved in those discussions, the early discussions with the agencies and the HTAs from the beginning.
And that early and continuous dialogue. The paper makes it very clear just how important that is. You've all echoed it. Alexander echoed it at the beginning. How can we improve it? Do you think we're heading in the right direction? European Medical Agency has a new mandate in this area on a consultation. Is it systematic enough? How do we make it really work effectively? And why for you is it so important?
Thanks for the question. I think there's a lot of room for improvement, no question around that. And I wanted to go back to something that Claire mentioned earlier, which is a key point in how we think about it and a key challenge that we have. And I would say explicitly, not only with regulators, but it's explicitly also with payers, and that's the evidence that's required. As I mentioned earlier, the process of making such a product is very complicated. So obviously, we probably won't run 2,000 patient studies that are randomized. That's one element of it. But the other element is really what the patients and the physicians tell us. If we go forward and say, well, this is an end-stage cancer patient, we do a randomized study. One arm gets the cell therapy product, the other one gets, whatever oral medication that has some palliative effect. What we hear back is from the physicians, we won't enroll the patient, and from the patients, we won't enroll in the study. But then we're sitting on the other side of the table from regulators and payers, and they ask us, well, where is your survival curve? You have to show us more patients die in the control arm than in your experimental arm. So how can we run that study? Sometimes when we were in that situation, we said, okay, we allow patients to cross over. What does that mean? In the control arm, when you get that super inferior treatment, you are able to move over and get the cell therapy product if you don't benefit from that treatment. What it does is, again, you cannot show a survival benefit. And that backfires so fundamentally on your ability to commercialize this that I feel that's a real trap for us. And I feel, you know, counting bodies in a treatment landscape of ATMPs in those studies is just not doable, and we all don't feel good about it, right? Do we feel good about it? No. So we have to really find a different way, and people have to see how we can do that in different ways, and real-world evidence, as mentioned, might be a very good way to substantiate the evidence and get away from that trap.
Giovanni, did you want to add on?
That is a question just simple of infrastructure and data. You can use historical data, but there is no infrastructure qualified, really, reliable data, and that is missing. And it's something that we can use the hospital, but then there is objection. It is just the hospital. We need all the data together, certified, so that you can use that as control, as placebo, if you want.
Thank you. And lots of recommendations in the paper about the use of real-world data and real-world evidence. Do take a look at that. I want to just ask each of you to identify a key challenge for the next 6 months. But before I do that, is there any burning question from our audience today? Yes, and please introduce yourself and please be brief. We're going to try and squeeze a couple in.
Can you hear me? Yeah, nice to meet you, everyone. I'm Solenjo. I'm working for Therapies for Disease Europe. It will be more comment from my side. I wanted to thank all the speakers today and the past speaker for the other panel who mentioned really the need for the future pharmaceutical legislation to improve the access, availability, and affordability of ATMPs. And it will be a comment because also the past speaker today mentioned the need to improve cross-border collaboration and also that ERN can be the solution. Therapies and the 24 ERN collaborators published a letter last week and sent this letter to the European Commission, the President of the European Parliament, as well as the heads of the member states, to ensure that in the future, ERN will have long-standing funding, as well as that ERN will be integrated in the healthcare system, national healthcare system. So I wanted to thank all the speakers today for this.
Thank you, and I hope we'll come back on that in our second panel where we're really going to focus on some of these access issues going beyond just the legislation as well. So thank you very much for that. So for each of you, I'm delighted that we have with us interest group member Billy Kelleher, MEP, who in a moment is going to react to what we have heard. But before we do that, and for this last question, let me go in the reverse order to the way I started. So I'll go to Anne first. What for you is the most important priority? We heard at the beginning, we have 6 months to go. We have these key legislative files on the table. What for you is the priority for this 6 months if we are to secure the promise of ATMPs for patients?
I think it's really important to look at the changes in this legislation through the eyes of an ATMP and to take the effort to understand more the details around the production, the clinical development, the commercialization of that, and then allow that language to be flexible and incentivizing the European footprint for the ATMPs. I just want to close out with one great example in Europe, which is we've seen most of the innovation, and that was mentioned earlier, coming from China and the US. But this year, we had a European center present first data on patients with lupus. Absolutely breathtaking data. The first data ever presented on 7 patients who achieved complete remission and cure. And the whole field of cell therapy is now developing in lupus. If you look at the companies, there's only very few that are headquartered in Europe. The majority are in the US and in China. I think that's something to keep in mind, that we really make us a strong footprint here in Europe. We have the bright people here in Europe who drive this forward. So why wouldn't we be the ones to advance this?
Thank you very much. Giovanni, you're next 6 months.
Details, 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 more and more details. Just the small devil is in the details, and the text needs to be seen, read, and checked. And there is one thing really missing. how to close the gap between the academia and the industry. It's damning us. We publish a lot and we don't transform these ideas in products. Has to be solved.
Thank you very much indeed. I wish we had but we don't at this stage. Let me come to Claire.
I'm going to go the other way, broad. No, so, I mean, I think there's not just one thing, but the importance of keeping the patients at the center of what we do and empowering and enabling clinicians and academic developers to get these transformative therapies to patients through flexibility, through harmonization, through cross-border working.
Thank you. And that is why we started with the patients and we're finishing with them. Eleni.
Thank you so much. So the message is clear. We actually need a leader at the European level to just put forward and proceed and promote the access to novel therapies file and harmonize and coordinate the whole effort. This is what the Commission did with the emergencies. They actually established the whole directorate, the HERA, on emergencies. They could do that with access and just follow up the different legislative files. And we need commitment. We need the European Health Data Space to be voted and adopted by the European Parliament as soon as possible. And of course, we want the Parliament to ask for a revision of the Cross-Border Healthcare Directive. We have to, and we have to at the same time ensure the sustainability of the European reference networks. They are there, they are a flagship initiative. Let's utilize them. Thank you.
Which makes a perfect bridge to what we're going to talk about in our second panel. Please stay here for a moment because I would like to hear from Billy before I allow you all to go. So Billy Kelleher, MEP, thank you so much for being with us. Your reflections and thoughts on what you've heard.
Thanks very much, Jackie. The reflections and what I've heard and what we hope will come out, I hope will be compatible with what is requested here. The concerns, I suppose, I have when I look into the future, we talk about future proofing. I mean, we're still very dependent on member states to make decisions. And of course, member states make decisions based on the harsh reality of national budgets. And I'll just give you a reference point, for example. I mean, during the COVID pandemic, which showed one thing for certain, that we have huge capacity in the European Union when we work collectively and collaboratively. In other words, when national governments are all going the same direction as the Commission and as the Parliament itself. Because we were in an emergency, we suspended normal rules and we went about it in a very, aggressive way to address the issue of COVID. And of course, that was the critical issue was suspending rules. We suspended rules in terms of national budgets. So governments were able to spend beyond what they were entitled to spend in normal times. Of course, when we are now looking at the pharmaceutical strategy and the broader policies underpinning it and the move towards a health union, the key question will be, will national governments cooperate in that journey? Because national governments don't like handing over their budgetary parameters to others to spend or to set thresholds. And that would be the issue of grave concern. So reference has been made here with regard to, academia, research, clinical trials, clinicians, right out to approval, health technology assessments, and right to the patient. Of course, in doing all that, you must identify the need in the first place. And the one thing that I've always noticed in my entire life as a public representative, which is now over 30 years, governments don't like identifying need. They simply do not like identifying need. And I don't mean that dismissively. Because when you identify a need, you must come up with addressing that need by providing resources. And I have stood outside a national parliament in my own country for years as a TD and as a member, as health spokesperson, demanding medicines that were transformative, that were life-saving. But at the time, the Irish government hadn't the financial capabilities to pay for those medicines. So the issue that's missing in all of this is the certainty that if all the people here, from patient advocacy groups, from clinicians, researchers, and industry, the key one that is still missing is the guarantee that if all of these people work collectively and collaboratively together and bring forward an advanced therapeutic medicine, that it will be approved and there will be immediate reimbursement. and that it will be made available to patients. And we have to continue on our path to ensure that that pressure that is required from the European Union in terms of its health union policies and proposals, but that percolates down to national governments. Because some countries, even during the COVID pandemic, refused the initial disbursement of COVID vaccines because they couldn't afford to pay for them. So that is a reality, and that is a weakness in the link. So I hope that over the next number of months, in terms of the discussions that will come out of here and out of the Council, that we will have a future-proofed regulatory system, because I'd hate to see a regulatory system that's designed to slow the process rather than enhance the advances that we can make in medicines, in technologies that are coming so quickly at us at this stage, and ensuring that they get to the patients in a timely manner. So Transform, it's an important part of this in terms of facilitating discussions, keeping ATMPs to the fore, keeping patients who will benefit from these therapies to the fore. But in doing that, we must make sure that governments, and they're of all political colours across the European Union, they all look at budgets at the end of the day, that there is some mechanism put in place that can ensure that if you have a transformative medicine, it will be funded, reimbursed and made available to patients. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Billy. I think music to the ears of many people here, and your commitment to it will be very much welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking Billy and the whole of this panel for a great session? Thank you so much. Giovanni said... he said it was about details, details, details. There's lots of detail in here. Please do take a look. Thank you all very much indeed. So a little bit later, we're going to come back to focus on some of those access issues, not just relating to the legislation, the proposal on the table, but also going beyond the question of legislation, and many of you have already raised some of the crucial issues relating to infrastructure, relating to cross-border healthcare and so on. But before we do that, we have a very special part of today's proceedings, because we keep talking about putting the patients at the heart of this. We want to hear from people who have benefited from these therapies. So I am really delighted to welcome Giuseppe Selvarolo and Simona Anese to come and talk to us about their experiences. They are both former thalassemia patients who received these therapies. It has transformed their lives. It is wonderful to have you with us. Come and sit with me. I tell you, Simona, come this side of me, or do you want to sit next to each other? No, Simona, vieni qua. Se mi puoi passare, grazie mille. Okay, they will speak in Italian, so if you need interpretation into English, it is on channel 2. Great to have our interpreter with us. Thank you so much. Headsets here, buttons down the side where the head. So, it is so good to have you with us. Veramente grazie mille che siete con noi. Giuseppe, please, your experience.
First of all, I would like to apologize for my emotion. First of all, I would like to thank the international stakeholders to give us this opportunity to share our experience. First of all, I'm really emotional. I'm very, very sorry. Do you prefer me to ask you questions? Sorry, I am touched and I'm emotional. I would like Simona to start, maybe. Okay. Don't worry. Just explain to us what is your experience. Well, in fact, we're here to share with us our experience before, during, and after our disease. I'm Giuseppe. I'm here with Simona. We used to be suffering from thalassemia. Now I'm okay. So I've solved this problem for 7 years now. But I would say that the diagnosis of my disease was done when I was 1 year old approximately. At that time, this disease was not very much known. There were no drugs, no care, no medical treatment to help us with this. So it was really difficult for us, meaning also our parents, when at that time they were informed about thalassemia, about our problem. So once more, I really would like to thank also my parents, as well as all the ones that we have met, we have encountered, and helped us to come to the point where we are now, to find suitable care for getting over with this disease. Thalassemia was not easy. That was a long procedure. The long years we have faced many problems and difficulties. For example, we were very tired. We didn't want to eat much, and we were somehow different than the other people of our society, of our friends. We were somehow in troubles, and also you needed to go to the hospital, so you were just going to the hospital and back home. Yes, of course, hospital each, I would say 15, 20 days. I need blood transfer, so we had to go, and then, but that was also very heavy. For example, when you are, I don't know, 12, 15 years old, then you have to go back home because you need to go through your medical therapy. So that was really, really difficult. And we need to stay also 10, 12 hours just immobilized. Then new therapies have come around. So this therapy gave you a completely new life. Can we say that? Yes, this new therapy was a major step ahead towards the previous treatments, which were just, a pill every morning. So very simple, of course, but also less effective. Thank you very much, Giuseppe. Your story is really nice to hear. Simona, can we share your experience too? Well, I also would like to say that my parents found out when I was 15 months that I had this disease because they were looking at me. They saw that I was somehow yellow in my face. I also had temperature. So really, they discovered this because they were looking at me. So we have started to work together towards a treatment. That means blood transfer each other 2 weeks. So, of course, calendar and quantities had to be very precise, very punctual. Of course, I was always very weak. I had a headache all the time. I could not eat. But really what pushed us to search for an alternative solution while growing was, what are the consequences of this disease? What will happen in the future? And by trying to give an answer to this question, then we really searched for an alternative solution. And while doing so, we really tried all together to understand whether my problem was to be solved, could be solved or not. So we had the opportunity to talk to Professor Locatelli. Thanks to him, we have, first of all, we had a private appointment with him. He illustrated in details all the scientific words, all the terminology about what was to be done. Of course, that was very hard. I was 18 when I had to make this difficult choice, namely to opt for a transplant or not. So I was 18 when I was asked to make this key and pivotal choice. That was really, really hard. Then when we eventually said okay to do transplant, well, he was of course, explaining this to us. We did all the tests and analysis and everything to make sure that I was capable of accept. My body was able to and capable to accept this. Then we, of course, have been able to take the sick part of my cells away. So that then the transplant was done, and also chemotherapy was advised and carried out because, of course, we had to go through this way in order to create a new life in my body. Everything went just well. So I'm not doing any blood transfer for 6 years now, which means that my life has changed a lot and very profoundly. Also professionally, it's okay. I have my life. I can go to the gym. I feel okay. Also, hemoglobin, is at a reasonable level, 12, 13. And as I said, I'm not doing any blood transfer for 6 years. And that is, of course, very rewarding. You were the same age when your decision needed to be taken? No, I was 24, well, 23 to be more precise, because then I had to wait 1 year. I was the first one, in fact, to do this kind of experiment, so to speak. So I was 33 when I was asked to decide, and then I was 24 when I went through the transplant, and then I went through exactly the same experience, the same procedure as Simona. So I was transplanted, I think, a few months before her, and of course, my life was just completely changed. Simona, Giuseppe, thank you very much for the courage of coming here and share your story, which helps us understanding how important is things that we're sharing today. So really a warm thank to you, and I wish you the best for your future.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our interpreter. Thank you for being with us. So we're now going to focus on making sure there can be more Giuseppes and more Simonas in the future, that patients get safe and timely access to these amazing transformative therapies. And we've heard just how transformative they can be. So what are the solutions to the access challenge? I'm delighted. We're just going to get some nameplates up. We already began to talk about some of these issues in our first panel. We talked about the legislative dossiers, but we also talked about infrastructure issues, how to use the infrastructures, European reference networks and so on, that we have better, the importance of public registries, the importance of cross-border health rights, all issues we want to come back to in this discussion. So let me welcome, I'm delighted to welcome, and I saw she arrived just a few moments ago, Susana Solis Perez, MEP, who is co-host of this event. So Susana, thank you so much for co-hosting the event. And she is, as I mentioned earlier, a member of the Transform MEP interest group. It is great to have you with us. I know things are crazy busy right now. So really, really good that you could join us. Thank you. Please do come and sit with me. I'm welcoming back Martine Perjean, President of the International Patient Organization for Primary Immunodeficiencies. Always great to have with us Ana Hidalgo Simon, Renew Translational Ambassador at Leiden University Medical Center. Very good to see you, Anna, and lovely to have you with us. And Thomas Bowles, good to have you back too, Thomas, Head of Government Affairs and Patient Advocacy, EMEA and APAC at PTC Therapeutics. So this time, I've asked our speakers not to make opening statements. We're going to dive straight in. I'm going to ask them a few questions, and then I will come out to all of you if you have any questions. And Susanna, maybe I could turn to you in terms of where you feel we are. We heard earlier in our discussion, we are making progress. We've heard these are game-changing therapies, but also there are many challenges. What is your assessment of where we are and the challenge ahead?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for inviting me here. It was important not to miss this event, this Transform event. This is a pleasure for me. This is a crazy day, but I think the most important thing in the day would be to be with you and making sure, as you mentioned before, there are more Simona in the future. So as you have already said, I think it has been a progress. Europe has been a leader establishing the ATMP regulation, but we cannot stop. The status quo is not an option now, and we need more progress for sure. When we look at the challenges the patients have and that Europe has, one of them is for sure ensure that those treatments are available and accessible to all European patients. I think you have discussed about this, and that we need to invest in more infrastructure and to make sure that the cross-border health care directive works properly in the future. It could be great to have more centers of excellence, but we need to be realistic. So that's why in those countries where there is no those centers of excellence, we should make sure that the patients can travel and there are more infrastructure. But my second point is what can we do in the next mandate of this Parliament, and what can we do in the next months? And as you mentioned, maybe as you have discussed, we have the revision of the pharma package. Yeah. And I think this is a huge opportunity for ATMP therapies and for the patients, because we need to have more clinical trials in Europe. We need to have more innovation in Europe. And what is clear is that the EU is lagging behind China, Japan, and US. And we need to revert this trend. I come from Spain. I am very proud to know that Spain is leading in clinical trials, and we need to stay like this and even to improve. So in order to remain competitive and create those environments, the pharma package is crucial. It's crucial to include predictable, targeted incentives for the development of new ATMPs, and to ensure also that Europe remains competitive internationally. That could be one of my main priorities when negotiating the pharma package, because I am one of the shadow rapporteurs in the ITRE committee, and I want to make sure that Europe is attractive to all ATMP developers to invest in research and in development for the benefit of EU patients. But in the pharma legislation, there are more topics that could have an impact on ATMPs. For example, streamline the EMA approval procedures. There is a proposal to reduce, the number of committees. And I think it is important regarding the Committee for Advanced Therapies that we retain this expertise. So we need to be careful with the revision. Maybe we need to have ad hoc expert groups, but this is an important point for me. Also, when we talk about the hospital exemption in the pharma package, of course, we need to give it back to its original purpose, but it doesn't become a routine. But we need also to be very careful how data is collected and how important it is for ATMPs. And let me just maybe to finalize, it is not about only the pharma package. I am also the shadow rapporteur of the European Health Data Space. And secondary use of healthcare data is even more important than ever for rare diseases or for ATMPs. So this is another huge opportunity we have. And also the use of real-world evidence, because clinical trials, collecting data from clinical trials it's impossible sometimes for ATMPs. So we need to have the possibility to use real-world evidence, and this is something that I am also working on the EHDS, on the European Health Data Space. I don't want to. There are more proposals, but those that I am telling you involve my work, and you have my commitment that I will have this in place. It is in my mind, and I want to hear from you and to know what else can be done. Of course, putting the patient in the center. I know that you have already spoken about this morning. This is important, and stronger collaboration, partnerships between institutions, patient organizations, clinicians, and industry, because I'm sure that together we can drive innovation and accelerate the accessibility and development of ATMPs.
Thank you so much, Susanna, and hopefully we can come back on a lot of those issues that you have raised in our discussion. But let us continue to sort of build a picture of where we are now. And Martine, you spoke at the beginning about the importance of the work the Transform Alliance has done. We heard from Giuseppe and from Simona, very moving testimonies to the difference they can make. Going beyond the legislation, how would you assess how well we're doing in addressing some of these challenges that you've underlined?
How well we are doing? This is a very tough question, obviously. I'd like first maybe to have a kind of description of the field from my perspective, at least from the disease I very well know. I will take 3 cases. The first one will be, for example, in Romania. You have a child. He is diagnosed, and the treatment is in the country. You need to travel abroad, you need to travel to the UK, and there you get the treatment. So the child is much improved, really, and then the family comes back to Romania, and there nobody wants to follow up on this child. So I do think that this is one of the topics that we need to address. A second example, this time this is in Sweden. And there we have a child diagnosed, again, and the treatment is available in Spain. But there, the regional authority, the payer, doesn't want to finance that. So we need to advocate, and we did very well. Several patient organizations did that, and at the end, we succeeded. But what a match. And maybe a third case, and this case is in France. You have a child, again, and he hasn't been screened for SCID, so this is a very severe condition, because this is not available in the region where he lives. But he is diagnosed 3 months later because he is very sick. And then he goes through the process, but at a very late stage, he gets transplant. The transplant works well, but the lung damages are so bad that he doesn't survive. So the cost is there. You see what I mean? So not only we don't have the benefit from the transplant because it was too late, but also we have the cost. So I think that we have to address a lot of challenges, and I think that the Commission proposal begins with really a lot of things that are improving in that perspective, but I think that there is a lack of awareness on those therapies, on scientific background, generally speaking, because we can see that for other legislation pieces. I'm thinking of plasma derivatives, for example, where we have some kind of lack of knowledge. And I think that we need to raise awareness on those ATMPs. And we began this morning among, of course, the general public, but also the decision makers.
Thank you very much, because when we talk about, I mean, Alexander Natz talked at the beginning about moving the patients to the expertise, but you underlining there some of the very practical issues that raises, both, like you mentioned, follow-up treatment, but you also mentioned who pays and the whole argument around that. All these issues that we need to address on this journey. So yes, it's about finding the centres and giving people the right to go there, but also all those questions around it. Hopefully we can come back on some of those very complex issues a little bit later on. But Anna, from your perspective, how well are we doing and how do you see the challenge ahead?
Well, I would like to be a little bit more optimistic. I think that this review of the legislation is doing one important thing, apart of revising and actualizing everything, is putting the stakeholders that have a very strong interest in ATMP, like this one, very much closer together. It's like the timing is right to make a pack and really move forward, because the fact is that at the moment is, shall I use this one? Okay. So the fact is that at the moment, we know that they are the future, but we are small in numbers. And that could be a danger here, because we are in a point that if this had been a little bit later, perhaps there will be more consensus of how important this is, more awareness with the politicians, with the clinicians. But at the moment, when you look back at the number of ATMPs approved and in the market, it's tiny in comparison. So it's a danger for everybody. We need to make sure that we are front of mind in this legislation, because the future is here. And it's not like that.
And is your sense, just to follow up, Anna, from the discussion so far, that indeed that is being recognised, the uniqueness of these therapies is being taken into account by the policymakers?
That's a very difficult yes or no question. So I'm going to be a coward here and say yes, but I would like to see it more.
Yeah.
Because we are very used to the system that we have, and one thing that is being very clear today is that the system that we have needs to be improved and modified for what is coming in the future. So yes, we are in the right direction. A lot more need to be front of mind for this.
Thank you very much. Thomas, complete the picture. Are you glass half full or glass half empty here?
Yeah, I take probably the middle road then, right? So not too optimistic, not too negative. So I think the picture is mixed, and I'm really speaking from two perspectives. One, we are a member of Transform, which I think is a good initiative, but we're also a smaller company with a gene therapy on the market for a year and trying to get it to patients, right? So I speak from that more practical experience. So I think the picture is mixed, because I think on the positive side, as we heard really also from the speakers before, these therapies are really transformative, right? They are quite different from anything we've known until now. They're really, I heard the word curative. I wouldn't use that, but they're really transformative, right? They go close to cure, because they really treat the underlying cause of the disease rather than just the symptoms, right? I think that's very important. If you use other metrics, you can also say, yeah, the future looks bright because the number of clinical trials is going up. So more and more companies are engaged in developing therapies with using these technologies. There, the small caveat is, again, you can clearly see between the US, China, and Europe. In very simple terms, I think China is growing a lot in terms of clinical trials. The US is always growing, and Europe is sort of staying a little bit behind there. I think this is something that I think European policymakers and others should be really cautious and knowledgeable about. So I think that story is really good. I think when you, and I'm sure we talk about it as well, when I speak from our own experience dealing with the regulator, for example, actually the experience is also pretty positive. We can talk about whether the legislation should make changes, etc. But overall, EMA, in our case in Europe, is pretty well adapted to get these products approved, right? And even with the new legislation, those processes can be refined, etc. I think our experience is pretty good, right? I think where it becomes a little bit more negative is indeed, of course, bringing it actually to the patient, right? Because it's no good to just approve it. We need to get it to the patient. And look at our example. We have it approved for more than a year. It's definitely not available in all countries yet, right? And that's not because of a not willingness on behalf of our company. It's just that the process, when you then talk about pricing and reimbursement discussions, HTA process, it becomes very, very complicated. And I think this is, I was really struck what Giovanni said. He said it was very simple, but I think it's totally true. It's because it's new. It sounds very basic, like, you know, so it's just very new. So a lot of discussions just take a long time just because we're new. So the few companies that are involved in this area that have products in the market, they really, they blaze a trail for hopefully the others, right? So we could just, and that revolves all around, of course, issues along uncertainty of long-term data, or uncertainty around long-term effectiveness. We heard from you guys that, you know, you're already, what was it, 6-7 years of blood transfusion, but, you know, payer will say, okay, 6-7 years, what about 20 years? Yeah. So those are kind of elements that make it very, very cumbersome to get it to patients, and we need definitely to work together to improve that, to get it faster to patients.
Can I just immediately follow up on that? Because one of the things the position paper really underlines is the importance of dynamic dialogue, early dialogue, and and we heard it in the first panel. Why do you think, you said the approval side, the dialogue is working well? It's not working so well on some of these issues you're just raising. Why not, and what can be done? Do the sort of proposals that are in the package address this effectively if they come into force? What do we need to do, Thomas?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent. I think the reason for it is that despite all our efforts to talk about joint scientific advice and bringing together a regulator and HTA, but there is still an element of sequence in this dialogue. So you have first the debate with the regulators, talk about data, and then with the HTA, then with the pricing and reimbursement. And I think if you want to, and each of these stakeholders have slightly different requirements, right? So that makes it very complex for a company to address those because, you know, you maybe have satisfied them for one group but not for the other. And so I think the solution is there to, and I think you see the embryonic elements in there is to further establish this kind of joint approaches so that companies have the certainty that they satisfy both the regulatory and the HTA requirements when the products become available.
Just want to come back, Martin, on this question of cross-border health rights. And the paper talks a lot about boosting those rights. It talks about identifying and discussing access pathways. How do we improve them? And again, this importance of early dialogue and some of the other. What would you highlight as most important in this area if we're to get this right? And are we using the infrastructure we do have, like the ERNs? They've been mentioned several times. Are we using them well enough, do you think?
Well, first of all, I think that one speaker has highlighted the fact that the cross-border directive doesn't work so well, or not always so well that we would expect, as well as we would expect. And this is the first point I would make. The second point I would make is the discrepancy that exists between countries. And when we speak of facilities, this is really difficult for some ATMPs to be available in every country, I think, at the moment, because not everywhere or everyone is able to put them into action, you know, to implement them. And I think that we need really to have kind of hubs where we have the skills, where we have the facilities, the infrastructure for both treatment and also follow-up. And there, from their point, I think that the ERN can play a very important role. I think they begin. It depends on the ERNs because they are very different. For example, we belong to an ERN where we have, well, I could say maybe thousands of conditions because we have several streams. It's really complex. But I think that is a way to really help countries to progress and to engage a discussion between specialists and also patient groups. But I think this is we need to have a wise approach there. Having everything available everywhere, I'm not sure that this will be made like that.
Not feasible or cost effective, as it were. But Anna, I want to come back to you, Susanna, to react to all this. But Anna, from your perspective, and in terms of making sure that we use the infrastructure and we build the infrastructure, so identify where the expertise is, how do we facilitate that, and then build it in member states, something the position paper talks about a lot. What for you is the key here?
Two keys. One of them is we talk about this problem of the clinical trials not being growing or really staying is absolutely true. But then think about the other two parts. So the hospitals, the research, the universities, the clinical, that we are leaders is really rich and fantastic in Europe. And then the delivery part, where the hospitals are and where the clinics, again, top. So we need to sort out the bit in the middle, which is where we are failing at the moment. And for that, okay, moving patients is super necessary because we are talking about orphan diseases. And you have small numbers. It really doesn't make any sense to have all the expenses in everywhere. So, but we are going to go beyond orphans, and hopefully soon. So these therapies have the potential to be treatments for a lot of cancers, for a lot of diseases which are going to be common. Then we need to really be with the infrastructure ready. But we also need to understand that the HCAs are very different in Europe because the health systems are very different. Historically, we are 27 different countries. And we have arrived where we are not by chance, but decades of going there. So how are we going to put all these harmonized, talking together and learning from each other? This is the challenge that we need to start thinking now.
And of course, we're here in Brussels, we're in the European Parliament, Susanna, so we're focusing on the EU level and the legislation, but that action at national level as well, and that bringing it all together. How do you see, particularly in relation to these questions of cross-border treatment and infrastructures? I mean, clearly, if Anna is right, one day there will be an economic case to have it everywhere. For now, there isn't, because we're talking about small patient populations. How do you see that challenge?
This is the big challenge we have before us. But the first thing you said before is we need to raise awareness, and we need to raise awareness between among the political decision makers, sorry, and this is important. That is why, for me, it's an honor to be a member of a Transform for this Transform group, because we have now a window of opportunity when working on all this legislation, and for the pharma package, the orphan directive, the orphan regulation, for the EHDS, for all this legislation, we need to make sure that ATMP are well recognized and we have some improvements. But when we talk about access for patients to treatments, the question is that we have very different health systems in Europe and different access. And how can we manage this? It's not only at EU level. So there are cost constraints in the member states that we need to tackle. And for example, reimbursement models very different. So the access for a treatment in Germany is very different in Spain. So maybe three times more months needed in Spain than in Germany or in Romania. So that's something that we need to harmonize, and we need to work on it. That's why for ATMPs, traditional reimbursement models doesn't work. We need to find the way to deliver new ways to be able and to have also, I think, we need to measure, and we need to be able to measure how effective is this ATMP therapy. Because this is an investment. So that is something that we need to have to be able to know what is in the end for this patient to have access to this treatment compared with hospitals care or with all the care that this patient will need in the future. And I'm missing this part of policy making in member states and also at EU level. So.
Thomas, can I come back to you on that, because you talked about this effectiveness question, and we've touched on the issue of real-world data, real-world evidence, and heard why it is so important in this case to be able to use it more effectively. I'll come back to you, Susanna, because you mentioned the European health data space and where we are with all of that. But Thomas, from your perspective, what sort of mechanisms are needed if we are to address these challenges, and particularly surrounding questions of effectiveness, which is where, that's where the big questions get asked by the HTAs and the regulators?
On real-world data, well, I think the first is indeed that there should be a sort of common realization that whilst the gold standard generating data through clinical trials is of course preferable, but that in the cases that we're speaking about, so ATMPs for rare diseases, is simply not possible, right? It's not an argument, it's just a numbers game, right? You cannot organize large phase 3 clinical trials with a gene therapy because the number of patients are too small. So we have to have some sort of acceptability that, yeah, you deliver this product for approval with limited data, but then with an agreement or a promise that you will generate the data afterwards. And I'm not a specialist or an expert in this field, but it always strikes me that in the world of clinical trials, let's put it like that, so you have the pre-approval data and the post-approval data. It always strikes me that the pre-approval data discussion, so how to set up a clinical trials, works pretty good, right? So the companies can agree with that. If you have what the endpoints are, etc., what you need to deliver. When you do that, and you have the positive results, you probably get your marketing authorization pretty easy because you meet the requirements that you've agreed, right? And everybody sees that. When it comes to the post collection of data, to me it sounds like anarchy, yeah, total anarchy. So there's no common agreement. Do you how to set up these registries? Do you do this per product? Do you do this per disease? Do you do this per country? And so you see that, and we've experienced that not with an ATMP, with another product, I won't mention it, is that you can have agreements around how to collect this data, but then in the end, there may not be an agreement on your methodology, etc., what you've done. So I really think that there needs to be a much stronger effort on creating more certainty around how to collect this data, in what form, and how to present it than we do now.
And Martine, crucial to involve, as the position paper makes clear, the patient in that issue of data collection.
I think that would it be for the trials, for the treatment, for the follow-up of the patient, I think that patients are a mine that is underestimated so far. Because this is not so easy, and we have to also think of that, how to do that, especially with rare diseases. And also we need to go beyond the EU, because, for example, we're working at time on a condition where we assume there are maybe 400 people in the world.
Yeah.
And this is very important to gather data on this condition. But, well, this is quite difficult to do that. So I think it's really important, and I think that we are very much, all the patient organization, working on that, so to develop methods and to make it also accepted by the medical societies who consider medical data at first, and maybe the more, let's say, social or life data from the patient as less scientific.
Yeah.
And this is something that we may also take into account.
So we need a mindset change as much as anything else. Anna, a quick thought to this, then I want to come back to Susanna on this, and then a couple of other issues. I'll come out to all of you in a moment, but Anna.
Thank you. A couple of additional things to do. The real value of the real-world evidence here is that for traditional therapies, it was mostly pharmacovigilance, very post-authorization. With ATMPs, you cannot do that. We have seen that the traditional clinical trials don't apply. You cannot do blind. You cannot do placebo control. So for orphans especially, you need to rely on the natural history who is coming from historical records and for real-world evidence. There is no other way. But also, it's super important to make sure that everybody recognizes that you cannot wait until you are about to be approved to start thinking about this, because there may be chaos. I'm not going to say no to that, but you need to go with a plan. And the plan is an essential part of your marketing authorizations. With a good plan of what happened next, you are not getting there. And that plan can be very, very personalized, depending on the disease, the therapy, the countries. That's where the variability comes in.
Thank you very much, Susanna, on this question of real-world data. And you mentioned the European Health Data Space, one of the key pieces of legislation that still needs to be completed before we get to the elections. Where are we?
Maybe this is the most important piece of legislation finished before the elections, because I don't think the pharma package will be finished. So we are aware of the importance of real-world data in this legislation. That was one of my main topics when discussing it. There is a huge controversial here with the use of secondary data among other political groups, and I think we cannot miss this opportunity. So it is so important that the European Health Data Space is not only for the use of primary data, which is of course great, but the potential we have when talking about rare diseases on ATMP, we cannot misuse it. So we need this to get through the Parliament, and in a way, and it is so important, the role of the patient organizations to help us to use this data with all the safeguards that we will introduce in the legislation, for sure, but we need the data in an anonymized way, pseudonymized when it is possible, with all the safeguards. But I am asking for your help, because when discussing this legislation here in the Parliament, it's very hard from some political groups that they don't want this data to be available for the industry or for the research, or with so many limitations that in the end we need this data for those 400 patients worldwide. So I am asking for your help.
Thank you. Can I ask you one other quick question before I go out to the room? And it's about the hospital exemption. So I think you wanted to address this earlier, but you were trying to keep your opening remarks short. I mean, when you look at the position paper, it says the hospital exemption has a legitimate role to play where it may be life-saving, where there is no commercially available treatment there, but it calls for the introduction of clear reporting requirements. There are new requirements. It says there needs to be greater precision in the rules around the use of the exemption. What are your thoughts on the current proposal and whether it will address those issues effectively? And then I'm coming out to all of you.
And this is one of the topics I want to work on the legislation. I agree with you. We need the hospital exemption. It is needed. What we think is it cannot be the normal way, no? And because if it is the normal way, we lose important data. That is what you are telling. And so we need to find a way to have this hospital exemption, but not being a gateway. I don't know how it's said in English, but a backdoor way for approving ATMPs. Yeah, exactly, a loophole, because we will be missing important data when we have so few patients. So we will work with you on find the best way to reflect this in the legislation.
Any other thoughts on the issue of the hospital exemption? Thomas?
No, I would agree. I mean, yes. Well, I would just repeat what you would say. So I think that there can be a legitimate case for hospital exemption products, and you mentioned them. I think where some of us are concerned about is indeed that we don't create a sort of parallel regulatory approval system for these products. I think in the end of the day, the whole system is set up to ensure that we have qualitative and efficacious products and safe products on the market, and there are certain rules for that. And I think that if you comply with those rules, you get the marketing authorization. And I think those rules should be the same for everybody.
And the position paper also makes it clear great support for the idea of a publicly accessible registry to collect data on its use and a clear definition of what we mean when we talk about non-routine use. Any questions from all of you? Please.
Does it work? Yeah. I have a question on the existing legislation which we're having. We're talking about access for patients to rare disease medicines and in particular ATMPs. And we actually have 3 pieces of legislation. One is in the making. We discussed EU HTA, cross-border healthcare we discussed. We also have the European Health Data Space in the future. That's number 3. And number 4 actually is the Transparency Directive, which we have since 1989. And I'm not saying we should change it, but I'm saying why don't we apply it in the proper way, because that legislation could have short-term effects, because it's actually requiring member states to make decisions about pricing and reimbursement, not just on innovative medicine, on any medicine, in 180 days. And when I look at this, it looks like it is a vehicle we should actually talk more about, because it's existing, and we should actually administer it. I'm not saying we should change it. I'm just saying that why don't we start with ATMPs in terms of, oh, sorry, that's much better. Sorry for that. I don't know. Thanks. I'm just saying, why don't we administer it? Why don't we ask the Commission what the Commission is doing about it? I'm not saying we should take all those member states in court and so on, but why don't we have a discussion about how we are working with the existing legislation in terms of having better access to medicines for patients? And I think that's a short-term measure which we can probably...
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, please.
Mirjam Krul, I'm a hospital pharmacist from Amsterdam University Medical Center, and I was a bit worried when I heard you speak about the hospital exemption being used as a loophole, because in fact in my country we do use in-house production facilities for cellular therapies, and it is not to find a loophole. The aim is actually that we can shorten the period between apheresis and giving the cells back to our patients substantially. When we use the commercial CAR T cells for our hematology patients, we see 90% of the patients progressing while they're waiting for this product to get back to us. So we want to keep the cells fresh, close to the patient, and a very swift process. And I think that there is a very good case to be made for that approach.
The point Susanna was
outcomes for
I think the point Susanna was making was to make sure it is used precisely in that way and isn't misused, if I may interpret you. Is that right? Yeah.
No, exactly. We know I am in favor of the hospital exemption only to, we're working with you together in order to find the right way to make sure that it works properly, and this is not but of course.
Happier? Any other questions or comments? Giovanni.
There is an elephant in the room that is the cost of these products. And the issue is when the population that is the target is very small, there is no way to reduce the cost because the cost is more or less fixed. However, you can split the cost of production and the cost of discovery and development. And that is where academia can enter. Is there any provision, any way to use academia in a more profitable way?
Do you have a suggestion?
Hospital exemption? We are talking about it.
Yeah, I have a different point, but actually jumping on this one, maybe also, and certainly in the case for the therapies that we look after. So my name is Johan Prévost, I'm from IPOPI, like Martin. I think outcomes-based reimbursement models are probably the way to go for these therapies rather than traditional models. But I also wanted to bring another point to the forefront, which we haven't discussed today, and going beyond the legislative proposals and how they may help. There are actually a number of actions or support tools that the EU can put forward that will help, and one of them is on newborn screening. So we haven't talked about that at all, but that's definitely a hurdle to access for some ATMPs. I mean, again, if we take the example of SCID or severe combined immunodeficiency, ensuring that these newborns are detected at birth is what enables us to give them treatment with gene therapy in a timely manner. And actually, these therapies have a curative benefit for these particular children. So again, there, I think the ERNs can play a very important role. And yesterday, the Spanish presidency held a conference in Bilbao in which we intervened on the topic of newborn screening. We also met with the EU.
I'm going to have to ask you to be very brief, sorry.
We also met with the EU Commissioner last week who supports, this action through the ERN. So I think that's another
Again,
example.
reinforcing that point, this is such a complex and multifaceted question, this question of access, and needs to be addressed in that holistic way that the Transform position paper underlines repeatedly. We are almost out of time, but I wanted to ask each of you, and I'm going to go in reverse order to the way I asked the first question, in terms of two questions, really, and Thomas, to you first. In terms of the next 6 months, we've heard, and Susanna said, health data space, she thinks we can get there. Interested, she says she doesn't think we can get there on the pharma package. But for you, key priority for the next 6 months. And also, how do we maintain the momentum, the focus that there is on this issue and the work that thanks a lot to the work that this alliance has done, the focus on this issue and the momentum in the next we come to the European election period. How do we maintain the momentum after? So a priority for the next 6 months and for the longer term as we move to a new legislative cycle. Same question to you all. Thomas first.
Okay, well, very simple. The next 6 months, of course, everybody will talk about the review of the pharma legislation, so that should be a priority. I think the Commission proposal made some references that would, let's call it, help ATMPs. I don't think it was enough. I think some of the reports and amendments that came out are going in a much better direction. So I think the next 6 months would be, from a pure ATMP point of view, would make sure that the discussions in the Parliament and Transform can, of course, be of help of that, is to make sure that the legislation is more adaptive to ATMPs. But the second point is I just want to use my 30 seconds to re-emphasize the cross-border health issue. I mean, on the first point, we can all have an opinion about the general pharmaceutical legislation. Should it be 10 years market exclusivity? Should it be 8? This is a more almost a philosophical debate and it's influenced by where you're coming from. On the cross-border health, it's just in my view, objectively, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So it's not a question, you know, and what I think I'm expressing probably is a certain level of frustration is that this is being decided by the EU institutions and particularly the Commission and the countries. And if you ask the Commission, they will say, our legislation is perfect. It should be the member states who have to make changes. If you talk to the member states, they say, well, we don't really know, maybe the Commission should. So my call would be really to and again, Transform, I'm sure we'll focus on that as well in the next 6 months, is to make everybody to realize that the cross-border health situation does not work in this area, period. And we need to make change, whether it's to the directive, the regulation, or other, and we need to do that together. Otherwise, patients living in countries where there's no expert center, and I think we all agree that these expert centers cannot be in every country, patients in countries where there's no expert center will not have access. And just because a certain bureaucratic mechanism doesn't work. So we need to fix that.
Thank you very much indeed, and an issue indeed for the next 6 months and for the future, the next cycle. Anna, for you, a key priority over the next 6 months and the longer term. Are you worried that we will lose momentum as we move into a new cycle, or do you think we have enough drive behind this now to keep it going?
I'm still in the optimistic side. I mean, there is quite a lot of momentum. It's going to be a little bit of a hiatus with the change, but I think because we are in such a fast-moving scientific field, we are unlikely to forget about it. We are in a world that new therapies are becoming, and the problems that we have at the moment will grow rather than go. So I am hoping that the momentum will be maintained. For the priorities, I'm really hopeful for what Susanna was saying about the data space, the health data space. That really can make a huge difference. And also, I think that is one of the places where smaller investment will have more consequences for the whole of Europe. Because if we can all benefit from well-organized, solid data registries and collection of data, that will really have a long benefit. For the long term, the one that I'm more worried about, and I would like to see more progress, is the HTA's harmonization. Let's talk together, stall the fractionation so we can have common solutions, and convince the academic researchers that they need to look into that as well, that money problems and reimbursement problems need to be tackled from the very beginning.
If we have a couple of minutes at the end while we're waiting for MEP Sokol, I'd like to come back on that point, if I possibly can squeeze it in. But Martine, from your perspective, key priority for the next 6 months, and are you concerned that we may lose momentum, or what's your longer term priority?
6 months, I think that we may play a role in the different countries in raising awareness about the ATMPs among the candidates who want to sit at this at the parliament, because I think this is, yes, important that they have the idea that the innovation is key and Europe should be a leader in that, especially in health. Long term, I think that we need to secure the patient position during the whole journey, medicine journey, if I can say so, from the very development until the market access, and the follow-up. With indeed the possibility to be treated outside of the country where there is no expert center. I think that we need to work definitely on the joint between academic and industry. I don't know how. Would it be a private public contract? I don't know how, but I think we can't continue having very brilliant teams. I remember we had the first announce on gene therapy in 2000, and now this is not available anymore. We need to travel to the US. So this is not possible because this is also a big investment that is being done by the countries. I think that we need to address this complexity topic, especially regarding flexibility. This has been said, and I think that flexibility is what we need when we address a legislation that has been lasting for 10, 20 years, I don't know. And I think that we need also a change of mindset, because maybe I'm a bit, it's too much, but I think somehow some countries, they keep on the very old conditions like alcohol, tobacco. They put a lot of money on that. We don't speak of assessment on the results. And now we have new medicine coming, and we have no clue about the benefit they can, we know, but Many people don't have no clue on the benefit they can bring, and they will bring. And we need definitely to raise awareness on that, and also to make payers consider how to innovate in finance.
Thank you very much indeed. And Susanna, I think you pointed in a way to your priority for the next 6 months when you talked about the health database. Just 2 words on why you're pessimistic about the pharma package, and if it doesn't get done, what happens next? Does it fall? Does it come back? Do we capture what we've got and move forward? And your longer-term priority to keep the momentum behind this issue?
I want to be optimistic also. On the European health data space, I know you will have Sokol here, but we will vote, in 1 month we will vote. We are in the MB committee, so we are working very hard to have this finished under Spanish presidency if possible. And on the pharma package, I know that we are working hard, but the Council is not working so quickly as the Parliament. But it could be important that the Parliament has already a vote, or at least a position on it, as where we are working. And so that's why I am optimistic. And we need to keep the momentum. When I come back to my country, and it will happen to you, we discuss a lot of the pharma package, of the EHDS, about health, because health is a priority. We need to keep it as a momentum for the elections. We need to introduce these priorities in our manifestos for the campaigning and so on. And I think it is important we raise awareness, more awareness of the ATMPs, because it is the treatment of the future. And I am asking you to help us to have this debate very visible and very, a lot of awareness in our member states when campaigning, because that is something, when we talk about health, it's something that everybody understands what the European Union can do for them. And we cannot keep this momentum that we gained during the COVID pandemic. So now, health is not only, and all of us understand that health is not only a competence of the member states, but the European Union has a lot to do and to say, and that is something for campaigning, and for the next 6 months, it's important that all MEPs take into account.
Thank you very much. We do have a couple of minutes left, and I hope, can you stay with us another 5 minutes or so? Thank you. Because I did want to just come back on one issue. So we've talked about the legislation a great deal, and we've talked about many of those non-legislative issues. The third element that the position paper underlines again and again is precisely what we've been talking about, what the Alliance is all about, collaborative approaches and partnership and working together. And I wanted to ask each of you, and Thomas, maybe I could come back to you on this, because we've also heard a lot about academia working with industry and the link and making researchers understand some of the benefits, but some of the challenges here. What for you, how well do you think those collaborative approaches are working now? And can improvements be made? Is there more that we can do? What's the key here?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's essential, right? And but it's always a classic example where Europe lags behind the US, right? So every time when there's a debate about why is the US so much more advanced when it comes to research and development, new products, new therapies, etc., versus Europe, you get a whole raft of issues, some related to price and access and so on. And then it is, and then when it comes to collaboration between academia and the industry, I think there are still bottlenecks in Europe compared to the US, right?
Can you give an example?
Well, the example is that I think you have. I think in the US you have better established academic centers that have more collaborative cooperations with companies, for example, and you can identify them around centers like Boston and San Francisco. So these are huge biotech clusters where you not only see a lot of small and medium-sized or even larger biopharmaceutical companies, but they have also excellent academic centers. And the difference is, we also have excellent academic centers in Europe, is they work more together there.
So facilitating and creating those clusters, that ecosystem is absolutely crucial here. Anna?
This is one of my main worries, and I'm glad to hear that. First, the States is very difficult to compare with Europe, because 2 things. a lot of the universities and the academics are already commercial themselves. They are not taxpayers, so they are commercial entities linking with another commercial entities. Here you have the completely non-profit professors who are making deals with commercial, and some are very good, some are medium, some are not very good for society. Then it's the difference for the ATMPs. You're going to find this traditional one. You do the small molecules, then a company buys it from me, does the expensive part of the development, and puts it in the market. That works very well for traditional therapies. It doesn't work for ATMPs because they are so much more expensive, complicated. What I would like to do, and I'm representing academics here, is it would be very nice to have a better funding, especially for those orphan drugs who have no commercial interest. We have some examples. They work, or at least they look like they are going to work, but because there is no company interested of doing the final bit and take it to the market, the patients who know that there is something for them there don't have it. We need to sort that out. And then we need to think differently, because we are talking public money in universities, public money in the health systems, and at the moment the system is the commercial companies do the middle. It's a different setup, going back to the new. We need to adapt the system to make this work for everybody.
Susanna, I'll give you a chance to react. I might also throw this back at Giovanni for a minute, because it's the question he raised in his intervention in the first panel. But Martin, in terms of making these collaborative approaches work, and also we talk a lot, Martin, about patient-centered approaches. How do we make sure it isn't lip service to that? How do we make sure that you genuinely stay at the heart of this all the way through, from those early dialogues, the continuous iterative dialogue we've been talking about being so important?
I think that this is very important, because EMA is trying to reform itself, that we keep a working party where the patients are truly represented. I would say that should be the same at HTA level. It differs very much from country to country, but not always the patients are allowed to be there, or if they are allowed, they are not always as specialists. For example, I have an example where I was not allowed to go there because I would have had a conflict of interest, knowing the subject. So it's quite complicated to not being there, because you could have a conflict of interest in a complex subject where no single patient would be able to take part if they have not worked on the subject. So I think that we need to move to more confidence, to have stakeholders who trust themselves, and to work together with habits for working together. And each of us, we have our interests, but I think we all have shared interests, and we need to work on that. And from the academic side, I think that we need to stop the waste in Europe, because I think there are a lot of things that are be found out. But one day I asked a professor, a very prominent one, why don't we transform? And he said, we are not pragmatic enough. I don't know what to do with that.
Quite. Giovanni, before I come back to Susanna on this issue, you raised the question. What is your answer?
The issue here is complex. One of my lab was in a building in Rome that was used to produce penicillin for the state after the war. So that is a solution. It's the state directly producing a drug for their population. Does it apply to ATMP? I don't think so, because the issue is different. The issue is a small production for a small group of individuals that makes the cost difficult to manage. So let's develop with public money. Fine, we are already doing it. The European Commission is funding research on rare disease, pediatric drugs all the time. The issue is the translation. Get the data of quality enough to be authorized for marketing. And there is a missing gap of funding. And the other one, then instead to sell the product, because if you sell, it becomes private, go for the generic solution. Keep the IP in the state, in public hands, and give the license to produce. There is plenty of companies doing generics.
Thank you very much. Susanna, just to broaden this also to the collaboration, the alliance and what it's all about. which has been about bringing you all together, all the people in this room together, to work on solutions to some of these challenges. How important, what made you become involved in an alliance like this? How important is it? And do you think we can build on this in the future? What more can we do to ensure not just collaboration, as we were talking about academia, industry and so on, and some of the challenges there, but that collaboration with you, with the HTAs, with the payment, how do we get everybody really focused and targeted on this? And what's the future for the Alliance, do you think?
I just want to thank you because your work is so important for us. I am engineer by training, so I'm not expert, but what I have learned from you during these last years, it's huge. So what I am asking you is to do like this, because we need your expertise for my work and for our legislative work. So it's what I encourage you to work together. This is something new, as Anna said. This is a new paradigm, and we need to make sure that we count with your proposals and with your contributions. So it is very important. I am very happy to be part of this transfer group. Today, I have a very busy agenda. You can imagine what I had. I voted in the MB committee I have now, but I didn't want to miss this. So it was important for me, and let's do like this with all MEPs involved, because we want to work together. And there are many MEPs who, when we talk about health, about ATMPs, about the future of these treatments, we are united. So there is a huge momentum that you have to use.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susanna. I know we have to let you go. We're still waiting for MEP Sokol, who, because of that very busy agenda, but I want to ask if you need to go, Susanna, I totally understand. In terms of the importance of an alliance like this, Thomas, and the work that you've all been doing together in this area. We heard Martine spoke about it at the beginning of the event, why it matters so much. Why does it matter so much from your perspective, and how do you see the way forward?
Yeah, I think it matters a lot. I will be very brief. It matters a lot because coming back to the word new, right? So not everybody understands ATMPs, what it means from all aspects. And I think this Transform Alliance can make a huge contribution, not only at the European level, but also at national level, which I think we've started already in countries like France, but maybe for the future bring it to other countries as well. It would be great.
Thank you very much. So when we talk about that momentum, one of the key ways of working together to maintain that momentum. It is my great pleasure to see Tomislav Sokol, MEP here. He's a member of the interest group. He's a passionate advocate for patient access and all the issues we've been talking about. We've been talking, Tomislav, in the last 3/4 of an hour or so about not just the priority for the next 6 months, but the priority to keep that momentum going, to keep the work going. From your perspective, some closing thoughts, if you would, over where are we going?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this event, which is definitely very timely, taking into account the fact that we are now working on actually 3 important files which definitely affect the development of ATMPs to a large extent, and that is the European Health Data Space, that we are currently close to finalize negotiations here in the Parliament in the first reading, but also obviously the revision of the pharmaceutical legislation. I have to apologize for being late, but it's pretty hectic these days. A lot of things going on the topic of healthcare, which speaks about the momentum that you mentioned, which is definitely a good thing. So definitely healthcare has become one of the hot topics in the EU after the COVID, after Europe's beating cancer plan. Now also with the pharmaceutical strategy, revision of the legislation, European Health Data Spaces being the first of the data spaces that will be developed on the level of the EU. And this is something which is definitely a very good thing. Of course, we hope that if we return after the elections, that we will be able to continue the work that we are doing now. So I'm the rapporteur on the European Health Data Space. My colleague Solis Perez is one of the shadow rapporteurs. So we are currently finalizing this very important file. So the first reading. So on the European Health Data Space, obviously the most important thing, which definitely directly affects development of ATMPs is the so-called secondary use. So secondary use, meaning use of the health data, not by healthcare professionals and for direct health treatments, but for research development, making policy decisions, and all of the things which are definitely for ATMPs very important. When we speak about this, it is very important to get this right, because we have to, on one side, strike a balance between need to protect data and privacy of patients on one side, and on the other side, obviously, to make it possible that we have enough data gathered from the European level that this will be useful and representative in the end. So how health data space should work? So the idea is to have all the health data which is gathered in a non-harmonized, non-unified, different ways across the EU. That we have one way of gathering this, that it is gathered, cataloged, that we have these large data sets available, so that those who want to do research, who want to develop new ATMPs, for instance, that they can access this data through the so-called health data access body. So we will have health data access bodies on national level. If you're a research institution, research institute or university or a company, you will be able to make requests to be able to access this data, to get the so-called data permit if you think some of this data will be useful for you. And then obviously if the conditions are fulfilled, then this data will be able to be used, and you could use all of this data to develop new medicines, technologies, etc. So this is groundbreaking. So this is something that we never had before. This is one of the few things where EU has actually done something novel and completely new. So something really groundbreaking, and definitely this is something that has a great potential, especially in the area of research and development of new medicines. The crucial two things in the negotiations were, first, how to define the purposes for which data can be used for secondary purpose. Because if we do not define it in a clear and precise manner, there was a possibility that somebody, maybe big tech companies, could use this data for other purposes than development, research, and healthcare. So we narrowed this down. So now we made it clear that that data for secondary use can only be used for specific healthcare purposes, for research and development of new medicines. And this was very important. The second point is the role of the patients. So what can patients so what is the role of the patients in terms of giving consent or not giving consent to access this data? And our position was from the start that we have to make sure that patients have a voice, that they can decide, for instance, if they don't want their data to be used for secondary purpose, but that also that this does not result in data being not representative, biased, and in that sense useless. So this is why we proposed an opt-out system. So opt-out system whereby the patients who do not want their data to be used can opt out of the system, decide not to, and we believe this is the best possible approach to reconcile this need to protect data and privacy on one side, and obviously to get enough useful data in the other. On that we are still negotiating, so we currently have the majority for general opt-out, but actually on gene therapies there are still negotiations between the political groups where it will be an opt-out or an opt-in. Our position is we are in favor of an opt-out, because we believe, especially for gene therapies, that this is the area where we need data the most. And for that reason, we don't want to make additional obstacles on that. Some political groups have a different position because they are afraid that this data can be used to identify patients. So we have to see what kind of safeguards we can introduce. But this is the idea. So just to so the current state of play is that we plan to have the vote in the relevant committees beginning of November, that we make it for the plenary session in November, and then to start the trialogue negotiations with the Council, with the Member States in December. On the revision of pharma, since it seems that I don't have enough time because we have to wrap up, we have the first. I'm also the shadow rapporteur on one of the files on the revision of the pharma legislation, on the regulation. The rapporteur from the S&D, Mr. Timo Volken, has issued his report several days ago. We have deadline from until 13th of November to table our amendments, and then we start negotiations in the Parliament. It isn't likely that this will all be finished before elections. I think trialogue, no way, but maybe to get the first reading of the Parliament finished, so that we give mandate for the negotiations. Then after the elections, obviously the idea for me, and my priority will be to use this revision of pharma legislation to make our healthcare system more competitive, to stimulate research, to stimulate development of new advanced therapies. I think that some of the proposals of the Commission go in a good direction, but some things can definitely be improved in terms of predictability, in terms of providing right incentives for development, especially in those areas where we have problems, for rare diseases, for instance, and definitely I will be going in that direction. So a lot of work ahead of us. On the health data space, I think that it is possible that we make it before elections. On the revision of pharma, we finish the Parliament's first reading before elections, and then give the mandate for negotiations afterwards. So these are the most important priorities. Since probably don't have time, I will not then go into the broader ideas for the next term, but definitely a lot of things will be going on.
If you want to give us one more minute, you can tell us what the key what for you for the next term will be the key priority. Thank you, Susanna. I know you have to run away.
For the next term, I would like to see revision of the Transparency Directive. That's the directive of on the procedures for pricing and reimbursement. Yeah, so it's 34 years old, never been amended, because member states don't want it, at least big member states. But this is something that we definitely need to do because. Okay, pricing and reimbursement is a national competence, but still there is a lot of non-transparency. Procedures and rules are very, very diverse, and at least to develop some principles which can be used as guidelines when these pricing and reimbursement decisions are made, at least that we know what are the criteria, how these decisions are made. I think this is very important if we want to have this kind of a level playing field, and also if we want to ensure equal access for all patients across the EU.
And on that note, thank you, Tomislav. I know you're having a crazy day, so thank you for making it here.
And again, I apologize for being late.
We are out of time. I just want to thank all our speakers today for the great presentations, the great conversations, the great discussion. Thank all of you for coming, but I mostly, again, want to come back to thank those for whom this is what it's all about. Giuseppe, Simona, grazie mille. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for sharing your experiences. It is inspiring to hear just how much difference these therapies can make and why our conversation here today has been so important. If you can, we have a networking reception, I think, at the back of the room. So if you can stay for a little while and exchange thoughts and ideas, that would be great. But thank you all very much indeed, and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.